welcome back.
My name is Dominique Flint.
And I am Deveron Flint, and welcome back to another episode. But what if I soar? This is going to be another episode, a part of our series in regards to relationships. And this episode, we are going to be kind of digging deep in regards to your relationship with your siblings. So, this is going to be interesting. I have two siblings. I have an older sister and a younger sister.
And interestingly, so I have a twin brother, I have an older sister, a younger brother, and then my father has a daughter who is about 10 or 11 years younger than me that I just like officially met probably like 13 years ago. So it's been interesting, having that as a dynamic in my sibling relationships.
So we are looking forward to this discussion. I'm definitely looking forward because Dom, as she said, is a twin. So I think that will definitely give us some insight. And then I am a middle child. So, they have all these different sayings and beliefs in regards to middle children. So I am looking forward to this discussion. So let's jump right into the questions that we have created for this episode. And the first question is going to be: recall a time when a disagreement with a sibling led to a deeper understanding of each other's personalities, and how did that shape your bond?
So I was thinking about this, and one thing I remember as a kid, so I have an older sister who's 5 years older than me, and then I have a younger brother who's 7 years younger than me, and I have a twin who was born a minute before me. So- and one thing I always remember my little brother, he would always express as a kid that he didn't feel like he was respected by me. If I would tell him to do something and my sister told him to do something, he would always listen to her, but I felt like he always gave me pushback. And well, like he would often say he didn't feel respected by me. And I'm not really sure like what I was doing at that time. Well, I think what I probably was doing was I had this belief very similar to many of our beliefs as kids that like you respect people that are older than you, period, no matter what. And I'm sure I wasn't always the nicest to him. I don't think I was ever like a mean sibling, outwardly mean. But I think for when you think about the dynamic of the age gap between all of us, my sister was 5 years older. We're 7 years older than my little brother, and then my sister is 12 years older than him. So in lots of ways, she acted as like a mother figure for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think his level of respect for her was probably more so seen as like a mother figure versus for me, we were much closer in age, but still so far away. Because when I think about, his upbringing, by the time he was like 10 or 11, like we were all out the house. My sister had already moved out, was in, graduated from college. Me and my twin were in college. He was like 11 years old. So in lots of ways, he was like the only sibling. He was like the only kid in lots of ways. And so I feel like what he wanted, what I think he was trying to express was like, everyone gets to tell me what to do, and I don't feel this sense of, that I'm a part of this sibling group, right? That everyone is, constantly saying, don't do this or do that or don't do this. And like, I want to just be in this sibling clique. You know what I mean? I just want to be with y'all. You know what I mean? And so what it taught me though about my little brother is that he has always been like, he's always like kind of walked to the beat of his own drum, like from the time he was a little kid. And I mean, like always, there's like never a time that I cannot remember him standing fully in his authenticity, and I have always admired that about him, mostly because I think it's hard for adults to feel that level of fearlessness when it comes to like just being yourself. And I think he's always been able to show up as his authentic self, and that's always been like super remarkable to me. Just being a kid, and like figuring that out and knowing at an early age that like why would I be anybody else? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I should I mean like why would I choose to like be like anybody else? I should just be myself. Like, you
Yeah.
know, like it has never, even though he may have had struggles with it in his life, it's always appeared to me anyway that he has never had any real struggles when it's come to like just showing up as himself. And I
Mhm.
don't know, it's especially at the stage I am in my life now where I think there is nobody else better to be than yourself, right? There
Yeah.
is no one else better to show up as than as the most honest and authentic version of you. But I know I didn't always feel that way, and in fact, I was like afraid to like be that person and show the world or show my world like, you know, who I truly was. And so I don't know. I've always been pleased at being able to witness that from him. So if what it taught me, or just learning more about him, it just taught me like what a great gift that you could give to yourself by just
Mm.
being yourself and not, and I'm sure like he's had reservations about it and has, you know, had deep thoughts about it, but I mean I think he's always still chosen to show up as himself, and I've always found that to be very remarkable. So what about you?
So I think the disagreement would be me and my younger sibling had, I want to say, like after my mom passed, we were having like one of our deep combative interactions. And she made it clear to me that she oftentimes will want my advice or insight on something, and then I will give it to her, or I will kind of like talk to her, parent her pretty much. But what I learned was like then she would get mad that I was parenting her. And it was like very confusing. And I think because we grew up in a sense where my mom was not always present, me and my other sibling, my older sibling, would basically interchange our roles of sometimes being the sibling, but also sometimes being the caretaker.
Yeah.
Um, and acting in that caretaking role, not really clearly not knowing what we should be doing, but trying to do it as best as possible. And so I grew up with my older sister basically, caring for me and being the person who kind of put safeguards in place to make sure, that there was something to eat. If I needed school clothes, she was making sure that happened, and just being responsible when, our person who was supposed to be responsible was not being responsible. And so then that kind of, I was accepting of her being in that role. But my younger sister, I think that she wanted that, but she also resented that it was coming from us and not from our mother. And
Mhm.
so there was like this love hate type of relationship where it's like she wanted a caregiver, and oftentimes she wanted us to give her insight, but she also wanted a sibling and she didn't want us to be the parent. And so it oftentimes led to a very complicated and combative interaction. And finally, it kind of came to the point where like I was like, look, I don't know what you want from me. One minute you're saying you want this and I'm doing that, and you want me to be making all these decisions for you and basically doing things that a parent should do, and you're now an adult and you're a parent yourself. And then the next minute you're mad because I'm giving you guidance. Like, you don't know what the hell you want. Like,
Mhm.
you clearly are confused, right? And it's leading to you just not being sure what you're asking for, and being upset with what you're getting. And she basically said the same thing. She was just like, I want a parent, but I don't want you to be my parent. Like, I'm mad that you
Mm.
are having to be the parent. I want my mom. And now, my mom was never fully able to fulfill all of the expectations she had for the role of a caretaker. But then now it was really clear that she could never do that because she had passed. And so there was a lot of things that were unsaid. There were a lot of wounds that were not healed between her and my mother. And so she was taking it out on me, and I had nothing, there was nothing that I could do. And then obviously, my relationship with my mom was very different than the relationship that my siblings had with my mother, because they both also had their own issues as adults. And my mom was seeing their behaviors as mirrors to her own struggles that she had as being a parent. And
Yeah.
so it was more of a complex relationship. And so I will say, like, that was a very open and honest interaction. I don't know how much it shaped our relationship because, like I said, I think that the expectation was not one that I could, like, she was clear about and that I could actually do anything about it. But it was good to hear, like, that she was confused because I was confused at, like, what she wanted. I was trying to meet her where she was asking, but it was never where she was satisfied with it. And I realized, like, it was something internally that she was struggling with, which helped give clarity
Yeah.
of, of that. But I think that was helpful in fully seeing what she was struggling with, but also knowing, like, she had to do her own internal work. Like, I couldn't heal that for her.
Right. Yeah. Good example. So second question is share a favorite childhood memory with your siblings that embodies the unique connection only siblings share. Can't wait to hear this one.
So, one of the things, me and my older sibling were really close. Growing up, like I said, we experienced a lot of things together, and we had, like, very open and honest interactions. And I think with my younger sister, a lot of it was like trying to shield her from some of the experiences that we were having. But I was thinking about this, and one time I remember I was a golden girl, which is like a dance person for our football team. And it was senior night. And at the time, my older sister was living in Florida. And like I said, we were very close, and I was, like, really missing her. And I just remember senior night, everybody was there, my family had shown up, whatever, and my parents had surprised me with my sister. She showed
Oh.
up on senior night, and I just remember seeing her and, like, running off the field and hugging her, like, literally boohoo crying, like, that she had, like, she was there, and, like, just being so excited to see her because it had been me and her, like, against the world, like, we for so many times had went through things that no one even had a clue. We
Mhm.
kept a lot of things secret, and so it was like we were living this life that only few people had insight about. So when I saw her, I was just like, someone who fully gets me, like, is here. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I just missed her so much. And I just remember,
Yeah.
like, feeling like, oh my gosh, like, this person is back in my life who fully gets me and my
Mhm.
complicatedness and knows, like, you know, I'm bossy, but there's a reason for it. And, I'm guarded, but there's like, she just is someone who got me at that
Mhm.
point. And it was like, it would be one of the things where I didn't have to say much. And, like, even my mom used to tell stories like, we were like freaking black. Like,
Mhm.
for a long time, they thought that I had a speech issue. Like, I wasn't ever going to be able to speak because I wouldn't talk, but it was because my older sister would talk for me. Like, so there was
Mm.
no reason for me to talk, like, she just got me in ways that other people didn't. And so, like, I just vividly, as soon as I read that question, I was like, I just remember, like, that senior night, seeing her and just was like my person, like, she was my person, and, like, she was
Yeah.
back in my life. And, it was just such a good feeling to, like, have someone who just gets you without, you having to say much. At that point, I
Mhm.
felt like she was the person.
Yeah. That's a good story. That's a really good story, especially, there's sibling relationships are just can be so complicated. And it sounds like in lots of ways, while your childhood experiences were complicated, your relationship wasn't that complicated, right? It was just,
Yeah.
you had somebody who fully and completely understood you. You know what I mean? Almost like you said, I didn't even have to say anything. They just understood. And how much relief does that feel, especially in a world that is already so complicated? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It was definitely a good feeling. What about you?
So this is pretty funny. So my siblings and I, growing up, my mom is a movie buff, and she back in the day, some of y'all kids won't remember, won't get it, but they used to put these movies on these discs called DVDs. And before that, they were on these big, thick things called VHSs that went into this, little contraption. Yeah. So anyway, my mom was such a movie buff, and she would have she had hundreds and hundreds of DVDs. And we always joke now because we say like we had movie of the week like every week, right?
Mhm.
And as kids, there were lots of movies of the week that were very, very inappropriate, but like we watched them anyway. So
Yeah.
like at young ages, we were watching like Speed and A Time to Kill and like all these movies that we shouldn't have been watching. Okay, we
Yeah.
shouldn't have been watching. Like I remember vividly in the movie Speed, this guy called this other guy a prick, and I remember saying it. My mom was like, "You can't say that." And like growing up now, I'm like, "Why the hell was I even watching it? Because I shouldn't have even been watching
Yes.
it."
Yes.
So
So many movies
anyway, so many movies like that. So anyway, we joke about it, but the funny thing about us is that my twin was notorious for like rewinding and like like replaying like what was in that scene. And so we
Yeah.
all got accustomed to like rewinding movies and then like getting into character. Like literally Money Talks, Liar Liar. Liar Liar is like one of our like
Oh,
family
I love that
favorites.
movie. Yeah.
And like we know them lines in and out, front to back still. Like we know them lines. And so sometimes when we're together, we would like somebody would just throw out a line from a movie and we would just get into character and like we would just start rehearsing and like getting into character and knowing all the lines. And it's just so funny because again, that's just one of the ways that we connected as
Mhm.
kids. Again, like I said, my mom was a movie buff, and we just any movie, that we could get our hands on that we would watch constantly. I mean, even like another one is like A Few Good Men. We would watch A
Mhm.
Few Good Men all the time, and we would like literally get into character, like in the scene where they're in court, and like oh my goodness, like it like makes me laugh just thinking about it right now because that was just our thing. Like it was just our thing. Like we knew all the lines and we got into character, and like it was just such a it's such a memorable and light experience, or light memory rather, of
Mhm.
like my childhood and like how we loved movies. And even though they might have been a little bit inappropriate, like we found ways to just have fun with it.
Mhm.
So that's probably like the biggest memory where I know that was like one of our deep connections as siblings.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I have to laugh because my kiddos know about VHS because my mom had
Uh,
VHS players too.
oh, okay, so they get it.
They they are fully aware of that, and DVD players. My mom actually had portable DVD players for
See?
Brian and Braden. And it's still in our basement. And then we had like Mercy was making fun of her because he was like, "Why did your mom have a box of DVDs? Like, I didn't even know they sold DVDs anymore." Like,
Uh-huh.
so I always laugh when people talk about that because I'm like, these kids know all about that because my mom was old school. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was very old school. But I love that. I love that. So the next question is, have you ever felt a sense of competition with your siblings? How has that dynamic evolved? And what positive aspects have emerged from it?
So this one was kind of hard for me because I don't ever remember feeling like I was in competition with my siblings. But when I thought about it deeper, I do think that with me and my twin, competition there was competition, but I think it was more so like, there's always this idea that when there's twins, there's the good twin and then there's the bad twin.
Mhm.
And I do think in lots of ways we were fed that idea of like, Dominique's the good twin and, Dom's the bad twin.
Mhm.
And I don't think I knew it at the time, but I do think that there's a lot of positive reinforcement that you get from being a good kid. You know, you hear it all the time, like, oh, they're so good, they get good grades, like all these, and I think what parents don't realize, what adults don't realize when they're doing that is obviously I don't think that they're attempting to create a complex for their kid or for the kids in their life. But I do think that what that did to me was like, well, it did a couple things. Number one, it allowed me to see him as the bad twin, right? And to like
Mhm.
buy into that. Don't get me wrong, he was difficult, you know what I mean, growing up. There were some moments where he was difficult, but I think it minimizes the fullness of that person when you only see them in one way, or when
Mhm.
you are framing your experience of that person in one way. And don't get me wrong, like I said, he was challenging, as to be his sister was difficult for sure. And I'm sure
Mhm.
being his mother was difficult for sure. Like, I don't take that away. But I think that's the first thing that it did for our relationship, is it allowed me to buy into that and to not see him fully, right? To see him as like this complicated person like all of us. And I think the other thing that it did to our relationship, or what the other thing that it did to me, was it created this like perfectionism complex, right? Where
Mhm.
like you get so much positive reinforcement. And again, I don't think that the adults in my life were attempting to do that. But when you see the negative reinforcements that your twin is getting from being this quote unquote bad person, bad kid, bad individual, you want to be so far removed from that because you see the reinforcement that is attached to that behavior, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I think it created this complex of like perfectionism in me, where not only was I was a good kid, I was a good student, like I was like good was always the way that people would describe me. I think it doesn't leave room for people to see that person who is so good as so human, right? That I'm not going to
Mhm.
always be good. You know what I mean? That there are going to be moments where I'm not living up to this expectation that you all have like kind of created for me, you know? And I think in my adult life, I've gotten so much better at the perfectionism stuff, but I think I definitely had lots of struggles with perfectionism, trying to create a life where I made the least amount of mistakes. And if I think about it, I think some of it was that I don't think I was fully prepared to pivot when something bad did happen, if something bad did happen. So I was always so hyper fixated and so preoccupied with how can I do this thing perfectly? Or just how can I be thoughtful and you know, over analyze these situations so that I am reducing, you know, the moments where, my humanity shows up, right? Because I'm gonna make a mistake. It's just no way around it. But I don't think that I had that understanding because there was so much positivity attached to being this good kid, being this good person, that I think I oftentimes struggle with like showing that other side to other people too, because there is so there was so much associated with like not being good and not being worthy, but I think what I learned though is that my twin is just he is just him and my sister are just competitive people by nature. Like that's just who they are. So
Mhm.
while I don't think that he has always said like we were always competitive, and I was like y'all was competing with yourselves. I wasn't in that. Like I wasn't
I
involved.
agree with
Like
that.
that was y'all. But my brother is just him and my sister are just competitive. That is just who they are. It does not matter what they are competing about. It could be sports, it could be who can read the fastest, who can run the farthest. Like it don't even matter. Like that's just who they are at their core. And I had to accept that it's okay that I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
not. That's just not who I am. I mean, I've been in situations where like I played competitive sports. It wasn't like I didn't have any any experiences where my competitiveness could have been stretched. I just didn't care. You know what I mean? It just wasn't for me. But I think my younger brother is more like me, where I don't think he's not as competitive, around stuff like that. So I don't know what his experiences have been, but I just know that, I just had to accept that, like, if I'm competing with anybody, I'm like more so like trying to outdo me. You know what I mean? How can
Mhm.
I improve something that, what goal can I set, and am I going to be able to achieve that? And how can I maybe outdo that goal? It's never I've never felt the need to compete with other people, even my siblings. It's just not. But like I said, I think what I did do was I bought into the competitiveness of like good twin, bad twin, and I think that did definitely play a role in our relationship. But I think like once we went to college, we got so much closer. You know what I mean? Because like in elementary school and in high school, we were not we, we were like oil and water, like
Yeah.
literally. And it's so funny because you mentioned that your sister spoke for you when you were little. Well, me and my twin, we didn't even really speak full words until we were like 4 years old. And my mom was always so worried, but we had our own language. My mom used to
Mhm.
always talk about how we used to talk to each other. He would say, la, 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 and I would just crack up laughing. She's like, I don't know what the hell he's saying, but she laughing. And vice versa, right? Like, so we had our own little language.
Mhm.
And so we were really close when we were kids. And then when we went to kindergarten, our first year, we went to kindergarten together. We were in class together. And after that year, my mom said, you cannot ever have them in the same class again. So we were never in the same class again from like first grade to sixth grade. And then
Mhm.
obviously in high school, you might be in the same class. It just depends. And so
Mhm.
we had classes together, but our lockers were by each other. And if like we were feuding from like the morning before we
Yeah.
got to school, and then we had to like be next to each other at the lockers. Like it was just, I mean, there are literally stories that teachers can tell you about. We would be arguing outside the classroom. They would come outside and see that it was me and him, and they would just go back in their classroom. I mean, like we were literally like oil and water. So we definitely created a much stronger bond once we went to college and we were like creating our own identity, right? There wasn't this
Mhm.
like twin identity anymore because we weren't with each other, So, I think it allowed for us to like have a relationship that was not attached to that identity of like being twins. So,
Mhm. I
what
love
about
it.
you?
So I think, for me and my older sibling, I think it was different than you and your brother. So it was where my older sister was always so intelligent and could do no wrong. And, she played sports. I wasn't a sports person. And I was always compared to her. So, like, she was a grade ahead of me. So, every time I would go into another teacher's class after she had been there the year before, they would always be speaking so highly of her. She was so smart and da 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 da. And so, a way I would combat that was I would just be the complete opposite. And so, yeah, I was the talker. I was like, I didn't care, I was just, and I was like never disrespectful, but I was just like, you know, my sister just had like these very high expectations and I felt like I could never meet them. And so like I was not even gonna try. And so, I don't think that I was ever in competition with her because I never wanted to be like this, high regarded person. But I think what it did was is that everyone had these high expectations for her. And then when she graduated and, her life didn't actually look the way that people felt like it should, it didn't match. I think it created competition between us, but where I wasn't like an active player. But like, I always like can laugh at this now, but obviously during the time it wasn't like laughable. But the expectation for me was not very high. Like, I was told by family members, like, I was probably going to be the one who graduated, if I even graduated, got with a drug dealer, probably had a baby. There just wasn't a
Oh.
lot of expectations for me. It wasn't an expectation for me to go to college. I actually only started thinking about college because I had a good friends who were going to college, and a guidance counselor was like, "Oh, because I was, you know, poor, there was like scholarships or these I would say scholarships or some type of certificate where I could like sit for the SATs and the ACT and not have to pay." And so I kind of like just found out going into my senior year about like FAFSA and like how if you didn't have money, like you could probably go to school for free. And I looked at it and it was taught to me like it was a way of like escaping what my situation was. And so that's how I actually got invested in college. Whereas my sister was talked about college because she was so intelligent
Mm,
and when I look back, like, obviously, we had looked at different things, like, a lot of people poured into her because she was the oldest, and she had a lot of responsibility because of what was going on at home, and
mhm.
I was more focused on my mom and loving her and trying to be there for her and not being so worried about, like, school too much because it just didn't make sense, and so, like, when we graduated and my sister did not go to college and I did, it was very different, and I think, like, because a lot of the things that I experienced were things that my sister felt like people were telling her she should have done, there was, like, this invisible competition, and every time I would meet some type of, like, new accomplishment, it was like, "Oh, wow, you did that?" Like, we weren't really thinking that that would be you. And I feel like for my sister, it was like I was living the life that she felt like she, was told would be her life. And a lot of her things that she was doing was more so what I was supposed to be doing, trying to find myself and things like that. And so, like, I feel like that kind of created this battle. And I think that it impacted our relationship because it strained it. Like I said, for senior year, I was so excited because my person was back, but then, her life just didn't line up the way that she was told it should, and I think that there was a lot of, like, internal conflict and resentment towards me that definitely impacted our relationship and strained it, and I, to this day, don't think we've been able to fully recover from that, because I have continued to accomplish new things that typically weren't something that was sought for me. And even me, like I said, like, I didn't start thinking about college until going into my senior years, and it was just to a way of escaping, and now I'm someone who, has 2 degrees, got my master's, and, have multiple licensures and certifications, and education is so big to me, which is not who I was in high school. And then even, like, being married, like, I didn't care about a relationship, I didn't want a relationship, I always said I was gonna be single, and now, my older sister, she's always wanted, like, a family and a husband, and again, just, like, these ideas that I think people have instilled in her of what she should have done, and her not meeting those things, I think has brought about a lot of regret and just I don't wanna say being envious, but I just feel like it's created this falsity of competition that really strained our
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah.
Because in her mind, I think that she looks at it as like I don't wanna say she reduces what I've gotten, but I will say, like, her and my sister at times have, like, tried to discount my accomplishments by saying, like, certain people have handed me things, which is not true, but it's just a way to, like, reduce what I've been able to accomplish. And then at
Yeah.
times they're excited for me, but it's not, like, the full excitement. So I would just say, like, other people's expectations and what they spoke in our life has definitely impacted our relationship and how we view our accomplishments. And, you know, external people definitely try to set the tone for what our life should have been like. And when it didn't meet that expectation, it definitely played a role in how we view ourselves. So I would say like that definitely has been an impact.
That sucks, especially if, you go from, fully being seen by this person who fully gets you and is like your person, right? And then you go from that to it not being that way. And it sucks because I think you said it good that like they poured into her because she was the oldest and there was all these reasons why they may have poured into her. I think my challenge with that is like, but why are we just pouring into one person? Like there's so like why couldn't you get that same energy and it not be, you know, it didn't have to create this competitiveness where like you both could have had those experiences and like who like, you know, if one of us is going to college or one of us is taking that life, what's the problem with both of us doing it? Like
Yeah.
it sucks that sometimes we as adults have all these expectations for for kids, and we don't create space for the idea that like what we want for them may not be what actually happens for them. And it's
Mm,
okay. Like it's okay that like you all thought that her going to college because she was so smart was like her it was her dream. It was what you all saw for her. But so what, did the encouragement stop because she didn't live up to that? Like she still like, it's just a reminder that like as an adult or as a parent, it's not your job to like put all these dreams that you have for your kid onto them. It is your job to create space for them to figure out whatever it is they want to do and
exactly.
support that. Support that. So you decided that you wanted to be in college and you wanted to focus on your academics and education, and that wasn't supported because no one saw that in you. Like it's
Yeah.
just it sucks that like, and again, very opposite of your sister, you weren't the nerd, you weren't the brainiac, but like you decided in a short time that like, okay, maybe I could try this school thing.
Yeah.
Like, like why couldn't that have also been supported? Like it I don't know. It sucks that we as adults just make things more complicated for kids than it actually has to be, you know?
Yeah. And I think just like the expectation, like I said, like, even when I have accomplished things, it's kind of like a shock, you know. And and again, there's like jokes that are made to it, but like behind every joke there's like truth, right?
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
but I also think like for her, it's like, when she has accomplished things, it's like, oh, like this is what's to be expected. Like you're intelligent. Like, and when she has, fallen short, it's been like, you know, you're too intelligent for this, whereas if I would have done it, it probably would have been like that with the expectation, right? Like when I meet something, it's like, oh, we didn't think you would do this. But when she does something, it's like, well, this is what the expectation is. So I think like it limits us both and it
Mhm.
impacts us both in different ways to, not allow her for her to feel like she has to be, perfect and she has a certain
Mhm.
expectation. But for me, it also has led me to be like, self-doubt, right? Like, am I even supposed
Mhm.
to be here? Things like that. So I think like it's a two-part type of thing
Yeah.
for both of us that, unfortunately has definitely impacted our relationship with that. Like I said, the invisible competition. I'm not in competition with my siblings, but I feel like certain expectations have been put out there that have definitely played a role in our interaction and our
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. All right. Next question is, can you remember a time when a conflict with a sibling taught you something important about yourself or your family? I got a good one for this.
um, so I would say one of the things that is a conflict that is more so ongoing with my siblings is like my siblings have kind of taken on this idea that my mom had, like family is family, but also in a more so I'm trying to figure out how I can say this in like the best way possible, but I'm just gonna say
Mhm.
it. more so like, I don't want to say like a two-faced way, but like family is family, but like saying one thing, in front of them and then saying another thing behind their back. So like for instance, my two sisters will defend each other and do stuff together. And then when it comes out, they'll put the other person like, well, this person did this, like, and put them out on Front Street. When
Mm,
it's like you guys are both doing bad right now or both not making great decisions. Like,
yeah.
so really it's not like a who is better, right? And that's definitely something that at times I found myself like, so my older sister was always like the caregiver and like the protective person. But now I feel like I've kind of grown to be that for them, like always trying to be like the parent. But because I'm not naturally that, it's seen more with like conflict and it's seen more with resentment. So there's been a lot of like conflict around that of like, coming to me for guidance or wanting me to kinda help them out of a situation, but then also resenting me because they're not in that place that they used to be or feeling like they should be the ones giving insight, even though, like, their situation just doesn't call for it right now. So I would say, like, that has definitely taught me the importance of, like, where they've taken on that idea of what my mom and my grandmother kind of taught us is, like, family is family, good, bad, or indifferent. And I don't kind of subscribe to that. So we're always in, conflict with that of like, if you're hurting me, I don't care if you're my family, like this is hurtful and I just don't want to be a part of it. And
Mhm.
withdrawing myself, where like my two siblings love each other and love me, but then they've done really hurtful things to each other and to me. And just feeling like at times, I feel like they can minimize those impacts, and so, like, when you're trying to be honest with yourself and honest about the interaction, they oftentimes are, like, dismissing it or
Mhm.
reducing the impact. So I think, like, that's definitely something that they've learned from my mom and my grandmother, and even my grandfather. Like, my grandfather would always tell us, like, "That's your sister, like, you only get 1 sister." That was a big thing that my mom would say, and my
Mm,
grandmother and my grandfather, and, like, my grandfather would always tell me, like, you're stronger, and so, like, you have to, like, be the one to, like, tell them and help them, and I'm like, "But why? Like, why do I have to bear this responsibility?" Like,
mhm.
I don't want to bear that responsibility. It's not fair to put that on me. But that's definitely something that my siblings have gotten from our older caretakers and they've kinda tweaked it to look the way that they want it to look. So like I said, it sometimes looks like a conflict within itself because it's like one minute we'll do things together, like, "That's my sister," and then the next minute I'm kinda telling someone about you and putting you as the person who's solely responsible or, "Yeah, I did this, but, like, this person did this, and it's way worse, like, pay attention to that and
Mm,
not what I'm not doing." So,
right.
yeah. What about you?
So, if you haven't already gotten the memo, um, my twin and I were like oil and water. But I will say he was like oil and water with everybody. It wasn't just me, so I'm not special. you know, it just so happens that I was his twin, so I think it may have stung a little bit more with me than it did with other people, but he didn't discriminate. Okay. So he was oil and water with me, but he was like that with everybody. And so as a kid, I got a big bark, but my bite isn't that big. Okay. So I'm a bark at you, but like I'm a lover. I don't really want to fight, That's not, and so lots of interactions that we would have, it would be me defending myself. It was never me starting a fight first because I just wasn't that way. And so we bumped heads a lot, and he bumped heads with all of us. That just was his personality. And so things definitely got better for us when we became adults. Like I said, when we went to college, we got a lot closer. But my brother has had his struggles in life, both emotionally, and he's had his struggles in life. And so during those struggles that he's had, I think what we have all struggled with as a family is, and what I've learned is that, like, I think I had mentioned in our previous episode that, like, we are not really good with, like, boundaries. I think that's twofold. We struggle with sharing too much and, like, this enmeshment that we experience as a family, but I think we also struggle with, like, the understanding that while I do have unconditional love for you, I also have boundaries, right? And that
Mhm.
sometimes it's not okay for me to allow you to harm me verbally, physically, whatever, under
Mhm.
the guise of, well, that's your brother or that's your, because that stuff wasn't often said. It was said sometimes, but I think it was more of a lifestyle, like that we just decided that we're not gonna set the boundary, and, like, we're not going to, like, get rid of you, right? And we're gonna
Mhm.
always and forever. I mean, my sister moved out when she was like 20, and or when she was 18. She had an apartment, she owned a home, two homes, and, like, literally all of us have lived with her at one point or another, whether it was me when I got out of college, whether it was my brother when he was 16 and got kicked out because he was difficult, whether it was my little brother when he came home from school. Like, we often lived with my sister. And
Mhm.
again, to me, the expectation was like, you're the oldest, you have to be available, right?
Mhm.
And to me, that goes back to, like, the boundary, right? That we were not taught to respect. My sister was also married during a lot of this, right? So, like, me as a married woman, I'm like, I would never just let y'all just come stay with me. Like, no. But that expectation was just like, you're the oldest. I don't care that you're married. Like, it was
Mhm.
never said like that. But I think the expectation was, you're the oldest. You, like, yeah, you have your own family and all that, but, like, you're still a part of this family. And this family requires you to, like, not set boundaries and not require us to respect any boundaries. I mean, it was so bad that, like, my sister lived next door to my grandmother, and, like, we were in and out of her house all day every day, like, to the point where she would leave her door unlocked because we never called her, we never knocked. I mean, we was just some disrespectful kids. Like, we did not we were never taught that, like, boundaries are necessary. So
Mhm.
I say all that to say that there was one incident that me and my brother got into. And, like, for the first time, I felt so strong. And I was just like, you ain't gonna talk to me like that. And if you don't respect me, then we ain't gonna talk. And da, 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 da. And I think it was the first time that there were actual boundaries that were, now, I clearly could have done this in a better way, but the idea behind this conversation was, you're being disrespectful to me, you're being harmful to me, you're speaking to me in a way that I don't receive, and until you
Mhm.
figure that out, we don't need to talk. We won't talk,
Mhm.
right? And so I think in our family that is new, especially when it comes to setting boundaries with him, because I think for much of my childhood, when he would engage in these behaviors that were harmful and physical and just abusive, much of the conversation was, you're better than that. You don't need to stoop to his level.
Mhm.
He has a lot going on, or he's a handful, and, like, every time you stoop to his level, you're going to get in trouble too. And it was
Mhm.
those moments where I never felt like I could set a boundary and say, like, no, he shouldn't be able to talk to me like that. He shouldn't be able to put his hands on me. Like, this shouldn't happen. And so it was like the first time as an adult where I was like, I don't give a fuck what y'all talking about. He ain't gonna be talking to me like that. And I
Right.
don't care I don't care who he is. Like, if he can't learn to have some tact and some respect and some restraint, then we will not have a conversation. We will not talk. And it was the
Mhm.
first time that, like, and he was using all his tactics that he used to use, but it just was not doing anything. I was like, oh, shit ain't doing nothing to me. I don't care. We won't talk. We won't talk. And so I felt, but as I think about it as an adult, I think that in how much of a disservice do we do to the people that we love when we excuse their behavior and we don't say, that is inappropriate. It is not okay for you to talk to me that way. It's not okay for you to speak to me that way. It's not okay for you to disregard me in that way. Like, we're not doing people a service when we do that, because they go out into the real world and they soon realize that everyone is not going to tiptoe around you because you have struggles that you're going through a lot. We all are going through a lot, and we
Exactly.
all live on this earth together, and we have to be respectful of each other. And that's something that I think was so hard for him to, and I think at times still is challenging, if I'm being honest. I think that he's so much better than he was back then, and I think that's the goal, right? The goal is to, not be the same person you were 20 years ago. And I don't think that he is. I do think, though, us not setting boundaries and setting expectations of how we're going to be treated. And remember, boundaries are not for the other person, they're for you, right? It's a way for you to keep yourself safe. It's a way for you to keep your relationship intact, right? Because if there are no boundaries, then everything's a shit show. Things are a free for all, right?
Exactly.
And that's the way that his relationship was allowed to be in our life, because again, that's your brother, you know what I mean? Or he's X, Y, and Z, or he's going through A, B, and C. And it's like, so the fuck are all of us? Like, that's just,
Right.
if there's no, I think the challenge is also like, how do we set those boundaries? And because I think the challenge for a lot of people is, I think we get confused that like unconditional love does not mean that I'm going to let you do all of these things to me, and then in spite of that I have to still love you. Like, boundaries does not mean a lack of love. It means
Exactly.
like that I am showing you that I love myself too, right? That I care for myself too, and that these things are not conducive for me, right? And so I think that that was like the first time that I was like, yeah, we really struggle here. Like, we struggle with like setting boundaries, and we struggle with like what we think those boundaries mean about how we view that person, right? And that we have to get more clear about what it means to set a boundary and what it doesn't mean. Because as long as we're not setting boundaries in these relationships with him or with anybody in our immediate family, we are, continuing to create this idea that like, your feelings don't matter, and that like you have to overlook them to safeguard like this family that isn't a family if you can't be honest and you can't, express your disdain or your frustration, you know what I mean, or what you need to feel whole and complete in that relationship,
Wednesday.
the first, right, so it was the first one of the first moments as an adult where I felt like this is not okay. Like, this is not okay,
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you had that moment to kind of speak up for yourself, and
Mhm.
even if you feel like you could have done something a little bit differently, I think it's important that we set the tone of what's acceptable, because it's also teaching that loved one that they can be themselves, but they have to also do work to be in a relationship. And I think like that's definitely something that my siblings have struggled with, and it's because of their interactions and people normalizing certain problematic behaviors of being like,
Mhm.
again, we learn from our interactions. And so with our mom, and her struggles, it was very normalized and like, this is your mother. And for her, her own interactions with other family members, it was normalized. And then, with my siblings, it was normalized, and it did not serve anybody. And I'm very adamant to any relationship that I have in my life has to be a two-way street. It
Mhm.
cannot be where people are driving the wrong way on a one-way street. Like, it's just not conducive to anyone. And so it's something that I'm very adamant about, that we both have to feel like feeling something for each other. And
Mhm.
if it's not, then it's not a relationship I want to invest in, and it's not a relationship that I want to participate in. And if
Right.
you have a one-way street, it just does not need to be on my map. Like, let's just
Facts.
leave it.
Facts. Right. Right.
So so yeah.
All right. The next question, I don't have an answer for this one, so I don't know if you do. I guess me and my siblings never teamed up against nobody. So I'm sure you and your siblings have though.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely
so this
have.
question is discuss a moment when you and your siblings teamed up to overcome a challenge. How did that experience strengthen your relationship?
So, I would say, like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say we teamed up against anyone, but I will say, like, in growing up the way that we did, there was definitely times where we had to kind of come together and overcome challenges. So, like, when my mom was actively in her addiction, sometimes we kept it a secret when my mom would do certain things. And so, like, there was times when my mom would use up all of the food stamps and there was like no food in the house. Times when she, used up all the money and there was no money for shopping and things like that. And so, one of the things that we did, so when we were growing up, my mom had a boyfriend who she eventually married, and he had his own kids. And so we had my two stepsisters, and I remember my older stepsister, she had a job and she worked at like a restaurant, and she would bring us like leftovers and stuff from her job so we could to make sure like we had something to eat. And then I, can't say I'm proud of this, but like her and my older sister would also like make sure we had school clothes, like we didn't go without. If there was no money in the household. So I would say like we teamed up in regards to things like that, like making
Hmm.
sure none of us went without, and really just teamed up to like be like a united front so no one truly knew what was going on in our household. We really had each other's backs in that aspect of just like stepping up, and if there was not food in the household, like, you know, just doing whatever we needed. Like, my older sister making sure like my younger sister was like taking a bath and, doing her hygiene, even if my mom and them were like busy doing other things. And so like we definitely were able to team up to make sure that things continue to move forward as
Hmm.
needed. So I would say like that's the way we teamed up when we were growing up.
Okay.
It's just like filling in the void of our caretakers and
Hmm.
you know just doing that. And I mean, obviously, we did that too with like sneaking out and stuff. But like,
Hmm. I'm sure y'all did.
teaming up in that aspect too of like, where I go, you go, the buddy
Hmm.
system. But
Right.
yeah, but like just making sure like my sister and my stepsister did a really good job just making sure like, look, hey, one pony don't stop the show. Like, y'all need
Hmm.
school clothes, we gonna make sure you got some school clothes.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so
That's love though, like that's y'all, got to there were not great circumstances, but you all decided, okay, how are we gonna figure this out? We're gonna figure it out
exactly.
together, and that builds a sense of like that builds a sense of connection that says no matter what we're going through, that we have each other. We're gonna figure it out together.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not alone in this situation, I think.
Hmm.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah. So the next question is, describe an instance when you felt misunderstood by a sibling. How did you work towards resolving it? And what did you learn about effective communication?
So this one is good. I for some reason, I know the reason now, but the I have for whatever reason I've created this illusion to my siblings that like I always have it together, that everything is hunky dory over here, and that shit just lines up perfectly, and you know and what it forced me to consider was like, why do they have that perception of me? Like, why do they think that like I don't struggle, that I don't, I'm not riddled with anxiety and overthinking and like perfectionism? Like, why do they not see that? And I had to realize like it's the thing that I show them what I'm out for a time. I was showing them what I felt most comfortable showing them, which was
Hmm.
that I did have it all together, and that, even when I didn't necessarily feel, I don't want to say I didn't feel safe, but for some reason I didn't feel the need or the desire to show that side of me that was falling apart, that was struggling
Hmm.
with, anxiety or struggling with, all of the things that I was struggling with, like I've not lived a life that wasn't filled with struggle, that it wasn't filled with, even if it wasn't struggle that they were experiencing, it was still my own struggle. And I think it's a part of that perfectionism, right? Is like not wanting to reveal that, because what people don't know or what they don't see is that, yeah, there is a component of self-criticism that you have when you are battling with perfectionism. But the other thing that you are battling with is creating this image of perfectionism and how exhausting that can be for yourself, right? Where you are so afraid to show this side of you that is struggling and that doesn't have all the answers, who doesn't have it all together, like don't want to show that, because that image it goes against this idea that you got it all together, right? And everything is fine. And so I had a friend say it to me too one time too. Like she like, you just seem like everything would be good with you all the time. And I'm like, girl, if you only knew that it don't be good all the time.
Right.
But part of it is like, no one is a mind reader, right? So like, just because you're going through those things doesn't mean that they're gonna just know it. And if you don't share it, then how can people see you for the complex human that you are? If you are either deliberately or not, right, you are concealing this part of yourself from people. And so what I had to do was just be honest. So I think like I think my little brother had mentioned it before, and even my twin, like they always say or have said, like, they allude to that, like, you have it all together. And I had to just say, like, I really don't. Like, I just have found different ways of getting over it, or of dealing with it, of addressing it. But like, I don't want you all to think that like shit is just sweet over here, because it's really not. Like, I just have my own struggles that I may not be vocal about. But then I had to start saying to myself, like, if you really want a real connection with your siblings, you may have to reveal that part of you, whatever you feel safe sharing, right? But like, just telling them that you're struggling isn't enough. Like, they need to know, in some capacity, like, what does that look like for you? What does struggle for you look like? Because otherwise they will continue to see you as somebody who doesn't struggle, or, is just everything is good. And it just isn't, because life isn't good all the time. But for whatever reason, I felt uncomfortable, like, revealing that, sharing that side of myself. So it just forced me to consider why they were having that perception, and not get defensive about it, but just consider, like, what could you be doing in terms of effectively sharing with them that, like, this isn't true. This isn't true for you. That this is just it's just not true, right? That you do have your own struggles, And so I think things have gotten better in that area since I have, been willing to be more open and honest about it.
I like that. I definitely like that.
What about you?
So I would say kind of like similar to yours, but more so of having this illusion of strength. I mean, I do feel like I'm a very strong person, and
Yeah.
I don't always wear my emotions on my sleeve, but I am a very emotional person, but I normally deal with it internally. I don't really let people see if you hurt me, it normally would come off as anger, and being a reactive type of person. If I'm hurt, I normally am not gonna let you see me cry. I'm probably gonna go and do that, in the privacy of my room or whatever. And what I've learned is that sometimes people feel like because I don't fully let people see the vulnerability of myself and the limitations of myself, that they just feel like I'm just this strong person that they could just put everything on and come to me for everything. And it's not reasonable. And I also feel like in the past, it has caused my siblings to come to me about things when I'm like dealing with my own stuff. And it's been met with frustration for me because I feel like it hasn't acknowledged what I'm personally dealing with and just feeling like I'm just here to be like the cleanup lady for them
Yeah.
and being like, you know what, I have my own life. Like, and really it's because I didn't set those healthy boundaries. I didn't put them in place and I just would allow whatever was going on with them to be at the center of everything. And I have met them with, regardless of what is going on in their life, I have kind of like put my own stuff aside to like feel like that was more important. And so like I was frustrated about that of feeling like, you know what about me? Like, do you ever check
Yeah.
on me? Do you ever see what I need? But then it was like, how can I get mad at them for me setting the tone and me forgetting my own self? And,
Mhm.
I always say, like, it's a gift and a curse of caring about people the way that I do because in the past, I have known no bounds of where I was willing to go with them. And that has resulted in, me being in grad school and having a full time job, being in a fresh marriage, and having a full-time practicum, and inviting my whole family to move in with me and, helping them get through whatever hardships that they're going through and, be fighting my own internal battles and just feeling like unheard and unseen. And a part of that is because I didn't allow my full self to show up because one, I didn't feel safe. I felt like being vulnerable was something that people could take advantage of you. And I didn't trust people to fully see me not being strong, right? I didn't fully trust that I could be vulnerable. And then I would be mad at them for not fully seeing me, but it's like, you didn't even show up, like,
Mhm.
So, I would say, like, that's something that I have felt misunderstood from my siblings of like, "Damn, I know I'm strong, but, like, I ain't that strong. Like, I ain't over here like
Right.
Superwoman," And
Right.
sometimes feeling like invisible or like their stuff takes precedent over my own stuff. But then I like in being reflective, I realized like I set that tone. Like I have allowed them to think that that's the way that our interactions were. And so, like, in more present things, I have been like, I'm still careful about how vulnerable I am with other people, but I have been more clear of like, I don't have the bandwidth to take care of this. Like,
Mhm.
you have to do the work. I can't fight this for you. I've been very clear about that now, where in the past I would just like take it on and be frustrated, but, like, still trying to figure out how to maneuver through all of that, and it just wasn't fair for me, and I wasn't feeling heard. So, like, now I'm more open and honest with my siblings about my limitations, but I'm also more open and honest about boundaries that I have with my siblings. Like, when our mom passed, I held a lot of resentment towards my siblings because they had their own internal issues that they were dealing with, and I felt very robbed from fully having the experience to grieve my mother the way that I feel like any child would want to grieve their parent, losing their parent, because I just had so much going on that I did not have time to deal with my own feelings, and so the way I was able to get through that was just to make myself go completely numb and then just
Mhm.
go into, like, work mode of, like, "You've got these problems, like, resolve them, you don't have time for feelings," and I was mad at my siblings for a significant time because I felt like their behaviors did not allow me grace to fully dig into those feelings. But I also was mad, and I think it's still an aspect that I'm dealing with now is like we've had all these sudden losses. Like I said, we lost my mother very suddenly and unexpectedly. We have their children that we're raising, which we love and you know, so willing to do that. We had to do a custody battle for my 2 nephews, so that was around the same time that my mom passed, which was exhausting and
Yeah.
financially a lot. And then, again, dealing with my siblings and just the things that they have going on, and then losing my uncle, losing Dash, and now losing my grandfather, like it's just been a lot, and frustrated that I can't fully have the space. And I don't want to say that everyone is given the full space of grieving when they go through stuff, because I feel like, there's different levels that people grieve. Like, you can grieve a job, you can grieve at the ending of a relationship. Like, there's just different levels of grief. But I feel like sometimes people are a little bit more understanding of certain things. But I feel like when my mom passed, that was like the thing that kind of broke the dam. I feel like so many people looked out for my sisters because of just them and the situations that they were in, and being very protective and concerned about them. And I don't feel like people gave me that same grace. And it was just like, you're the strong one, right? Like, you're the strong one. You're the one who like has it together. And like, it was like a no brainer of like, when I was like, oh, I have the kids, everybody was like, yeah, we knew you would have the kids. And like, but it was like, yeah, I had the kids, but it's still a lot. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I lost my
Right.
mom. Like, I lost these people. And I wear it well, like, but it's a struggle, right? Like, it's a
Mhm.
struggle. So I would say, like, that's one of the things that has left me misunderstood with my siblings, is like, yes, I wear it well, and I have overcome a lot, and I have done a lot of inner work to work on grieving, but the misunderstanding is like that my siblings don't fully see me completely,
Yeah.
and they haven't really given me the grace that I feel like they should with losing people. But I also feel like they haven't given me the grace to fully grieve either. I've had
Mhm.
to be concerned about other people, and be reactive to other situations, and that takes away from you, right? Like, that takes away from your experience, and you only have so much in the tank daily. And so, like, if you're given, you got all these fires to put out, you don't have a lot left to be like, okay, I still got this fire going. Like, it's not turned into a wild,
Right.
so I don't have to, put too much resources in there today. It's like a little, you know, fire, but it's contained, so I can let it burn, a little bit
Mhm.
longer. So I feel
Right.
like that's definitely something with my siblings of like, when they're going through their own things. And then the other side of that too is like, when I talked about this of like when I saw my sister on senior night and being like, my person, like, we've been through these same experience, like, she gets me in ways that no one else gets me. I feel like when we lost my mom, I didn't have that, you know, my people. Like, I didn't have
Yeah.
that. Like, one of the things I was so happy for my cousins to see was like when their father died, the way they came together, like, was so beautiful. Like, how they came together and supported each other, and just like got all his service stuff together. And it was just so emotionally, and he passed away very suddenly. But just seeing like how they held each other down, and like, you just know, like, damn, like, they've been through some stuff, but like, they got each other's back. And I feel like that was a big component that was missing in my own relationship, and kind of made me like envious, was like,
Yeah.
damn, like, the two people who also have been hit with this like very sudden and tragic loss, I can't even like confide in them, because I don't even fully identify with where we're at right now. Like, they're not in the same place. Like, this loss, the way that we view this loss is very different. Like, we're just not in the same place. And although we had these same experiences, we lost a very important member of our family. I kind of feel like I was on an island. Like, I still feel like I'm on an island. Like, I lost my
Mhm.
mom, but my two siblings who lost her as well are not even the headspace where we can come together and like use each other as like, you know, kind of build with each other and be like, damn, we lost someone, and like, we can get through this together. Like, I feel like it's just one
Right.
of those, like, you got to kind of figure it out on your own. They just not
Yeah.
place. So I would say like that is a multi-layered thing of like being mad at them for not allowing me to be able to fully grieve these losses, but also being mad at them because I can't grieve these losses with them together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I guess I never really thought about all of those components that you mentioned. I mean, it's a complex thing to explore and to like to figure out like what do I do with all of this? You know what I mean? I have all of these things that I'm battling. What do I do with it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So question 7 I kind of answered. I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but share a story that showcases the power of forgiveness in a sibling relationship. Essentially, like, yeah, me and my twin, we've definitely had our differences and challenges. And the way I've chosen to forgive is to recognize kind of the theme that I've talked about when talking about my dad and talking about my mom is just realizing that people come to these experiences with the skills that they have, and oftentimes they don't have any,
Yeah.
right? And so they're not able to show up for you in a way that is supportive and that is respectful and that is truly honoring you as the person, but also in that relationship. And I think my brother just has his own challenges. And while I do think that he's gotten better at addressing them, I think that I can forgive that I can forgive him because I'm in a different place and like what was once acceptable is not acceptable anymore, right? There's no way in the life that I'm living today that I would accept some of that stuff. But I can create space for the fact that because I'm different, he's going to have to be different in our relationship too. That's
Mhm.
what happens when you set boundaries and when you set, those parameters is that if people want to be in a relationship with you, they have to change as well, and even them changing might just be that they are aware and mindful of your new boundaries, right? That's the way that they have to navigate. So that's really how I've forgiven him. I get where he was. I have empathy for that, and I'm different now. So those things, while they do still have space to happen, the missing piece of why things were happening that way was because I wasn't taught to set any boundaries, and like that's not the case anymore. So
Yeah. I like that you talked about boundaries because I think that that's important, right? And I think that's something that has shown up in these different series or this series of relationship and in all these different relationships with ourselves and others is like healthy boundaries are so key. And I would say like with my siblings, I have kind of harnessed the idea and concept around forgiveness for a lot of things, and I feel like I have constantly been there for them, and to this day, if my siblings call me and they are in need of something with limitations and I'm able to do it, I definitely do it. But I think one of the ways that I am harnessing forgiveness, the power of forgiveness, is loving them with limitations, right? I think like that for me is so important, especially with all the losses that we have experienced. I will never completely, stop that interaction because I love my siblings. But I also know, like, in the current situation that it's in, I don't feel like they can fully love me the way that I need them to. And so, like, a part of that forgiveness is understanding that they're in their own limitations and that they have their own individual work that they need to do and heal from, and that lack of personal work is impacting their ability to love me fully because they don't
mhm.
fully love themselves. And so like that's where I'm practicing forgiveness. Is like I can't ask people to show up and be a certain way for me if they're not doing that for themselves. And sometimes a way of forgiveness is knowing that people have their limitations and loving them from afar until
Yeah.
that they do the work that is needed in order to have a healthy relationship with themselves to then be able to start working on the relationship with others. I know that it starts with yourself, and that relationship with self is so important, and it's just not there. And so it's unrealistic for me to expect to them to pour into our relationship when their relationship with themselves is at such a pivotal and lacking place. So that's where I'm choosing to forgive. And I also think like the other aspect of forgiveness that is a work in progress is that I'm raising their children, and I know how it was being raised by a adult who did not make the best decisions and that their decisions impacted us. And for a while, I was very hurt. They made similar decisions that my mom did, knowing the severe impact that it had on us growing up, and then wanting
Mhm.
to repeat that. And I know that it's not always a choice, right? Like, if we're not healed, a lot of times we repeat cycles that we
Yeah.
experience. So I do know that, like, logically, I know that, and I understand, like, the cycles that they have repeated were cycles that my mom also repeated, and it's just, like, one of those things, if you don't heal, your life kinda just, like, has this way of, like, repeating things from prior generations. So, I try to practice forgiveness and their limitations for their children, and knowing, like, I can't fully teach these kids how to overcome the experiences that they had if I don't find forgiveness for their parents, and also teach them how to love their parents while setting healthy boundaries. So that's one of the things that I'm practicing forgiveness. And I can say that it is a work in progress because it's hard to forgive when someone is continuously ripping off the band-aid or ripping off the scab and, inflicting the same injury or causing a new injury. But I think in forgiveness, and we talked about this in our other series, is like you can forgive and you can choose to how you want to move forward. And it may not be that you have an active relationship with that person, right? And I think that that's where I'm at with my siblings is like I love them. I want the best for them. But I've kind of come to the awareness of where I was with my mom is like, you can't love someone through their own journey. Like, you can't your love is not enough to bring someone out of a journey. They have
Mhm.
to find that inner love for themselves and do the work. You can love them from the boundaries that you set forth and love them from afar and wish the best for them, and with limitations, be willing to help them in any way that you can, as long as it doesn't come at a cost to you. And that's where I think I'm at with my siblings is that I love them. I want the best for them. I hope that they see all of the goodness that I see in them, but I have to put boundaries in place because I can't go and have a relationship like I've had in the past with my mom. Like, as an adult, I realized, like, that relationship was draining,
Mhm.
and I can't do that again because I can't allow it to cost me what it did when I was a child. Like, now
Yeah.
I'm older, I have I have knowledge and experience and tools, and I need to implement them because 'cause I'm not that inner child Devron anymore. Like,
Mhm.
you just can't do
Yeah.
that. So I think, like, that's one of the ways that I'm choosing to showcase the power of forgiveness is forgiving them for their limitations and accepting their limitations, but also putting forth healthy boundaries for myself because that's
Yeah.
what I need to do in order to move forward.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a good place to end the episode on our sibling relationships. I didn't shed tears like I expected I would. So, and there's nothing wrong with tears. You're going to hear me say, but I know that sometimes people's sensitivity can be off-putting, and I often do think that when I do display that because I know that it can be it could be off-putting for some people, but it is what it is. So in terms of soaring. I know for those of you who don't know, we are recording all these episodes in one sitting. So is there anything that you want to add to soaring for the next few weeks?
I think the way that I am choosing to soar is just continue to doing self-reflection and working on
Hmm.
myself. Like I think
Yeah.
we covered throughout this series thus far is like the personal work never stops. And I
Yeah.
think that as long as you continue to be reflective, you're going to always identify a area of growth potential.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that I'm just going to continue to do that work. I do have a therapist that I really love and has brought so much insight into my life. And so I am going to continue to be self-reflective, identify more areas of growth, and my goal is to never stop growing, never stop reflecting on areas that I can improve on. I'm not perfect. We're imperfect
Hmm.
people. And so like that's just another part that I'm choosing to soar up, of just like checking in with myself, being vulnerable with myself and knowing parts of me that still, you know, got some sprouts coming up and just need to be
Hmm.
watered and,
Yeah.
sowed. And that's the way I'm just choosing to add to that. What about you?
I would say the same. I think that I have to balance that with obviously wanting to continue to grow and be mindful of areas that need to grow, but also recognizing that I'm not like a project that needs to be fixed, that I'm okay with where I am, and there are still things that I want to work on. So just keeping that mindset for these next 2 weeks again. So piggybacking off of your idea of soaring for the next 2 weeks is similar to mine. Yeah.
So we will continue soaring and at times gliding because you're not always going to be
Yes.
soaring. But the
Yes.
main
Yes.
takeaway is that we don't stop flying and that we are continuously being in the sky. And we hope that you guys are continue to soar or glide, whichever you need for the next coming weeks. And I think the next episode will be on a series of relationships with pairs and romantic partners. So looking forward
Mhm.
to that. Again, if you guys
Yes.
have any questions, comments, you want to add to the discussion, something you want us to cover, please feel free to inbox us on our social media. Our email is also on our social media. So you can send us an email, comment, like, and subscribe.
Absolutely. Until next time.